fine weather for this session, so I hope you appreciate that, and not to spend too much time looking out the window, though. Welcome to this session, which is on sustainable and inclusive media. Particular media startups, we're looking at the way in which we might get some greater diversity into our media output by having a more diverse base of people and diverse projects out there, different stories being covered and from different perspectives. So my name is Diane Kemp. My day job is being Professor of Journalism at Birmingham City University in the UK, but I'm really proud to be coordinating a Council of Europe project called DIVA. So we are divas here, Diversity Accelerator. There's a few divas in here, I can tell. Can I get the people who are actually working on the DIVA program just to put your hands up so you can identify yourselves? Mm-hmm. There we are. So at any point, if you feel like talking to them, you're very welcome. So I'd like to introduce my panel at this point. To my right is Catherine Giles. Now, Catherine has conducted some really interesting research about the funding, sustainable funding for digital startups, hyperlocals in the UK and Europe, and she's going to be speaking about what kind of funding, where you can look, what's the best and most sustainable forms. Next to her is Ivana D'Alessandro, who is project leader for the Council of Europe, and she'll be talking about what the Council of Europe does in terms of diverse media, but also particularly about our DIVA project. And Sebastian Esser, who is a journalist and founder and co-editor of the Kraut Reporter, which is a German startup that has been successfully working for a couple of years, but also he's a mentor for some of our DIVA participants. So if I can just say a few words before we start. I mean, it's been a fantastic festival so far, I think. I mean, do you agree? Has it been a good festival so far? Yeah, I'll take that as a yes. Some of the sessions I've been to so far around populism, how the media has, we've not quite managed to capture and report properly on populism, issues to do with diversity in journalism in the Arab world. And it seemed to me that almost all of those sessions, the background to it seems to be the issue of a lack of diversity within our journalists. You know, if we are not within communities representing those people, part of those stories, we miss them. So we miss the populist story because certainly if we think of the UK in terms of journalism, 95% of journalists in the UK are white, mostly male, and over 50% have come through private education. So you're talking about only a particular proportion of people who are making it into journalists. And we know that if you come from spaces, you know the stories. People will come and talk to you about them. So this idea of diversity inclusion, really, really important, I think. And it's been echoed through a number of the sessions I've been to. And that's where we are in the sustainable and inclusive session here. So without further ado, can I invite Catherine Giles to talk about her research? They say it's into sustainable funding for hyperlocals in the UK and Europe. Catherine.
Thank you. It'd be good if I press the on button. So I, in my current role, I don't particularly do anything in journalism innovation in my day job, which is at an organisation called Digital Catapult, which I won't go into. But I do freelance work as part of work with Google News Lab, and that is around training and running workshops with journalists in various different countries. And that's sort of a spin-off of some of the work that I did previously in an organisation called Nesta, which is the UK's Innovation Foundation. And they are a philanthropic organisation. They do lots of policy and research work as well. And the reason why they were involved with supporting hyperlocal media, or community journalism as other people might know it as, is because we saw it as an organisation as being a fundamental part of community cohesion, building communities, getting citizens to be more proactive. And It was a 3-year program, and we did lots of grant funding of projects, so looking particularly at journalism and community media projects that were using technology. So we were focused on digital first, but not digital exclusive. And we did lots of primary research as well. So we partnered with lots of different organisations in the UK and also in Europe. And one particular piece of research was this hyperlocal revenues in the UK and Europe, the road to sustainability. So we ventured in this piece of work because there was nothing in Europe about how hyperlocal publishers were getting in their income and who was finding the most sustainable and sort of beneficial incomes. So lots of organisations had done lots of research about who was producing content, who was consuming it, and also looking at sort of the landscape in terms of where hyperlocal media fit within mainstream media, and even in terms of the types of businesses that hyperlocal publishers are. So many of them are sole traders, for instance. Some of them are limited companies. Some of them are set up as cooperatives. But this particular piece of research was looking at the different revenue streams that hyperlocal publishers have. So we did 35 case studies from across the UK, Netherlands, France, Belgium, and Sweden. So it's not, it wasn't sort of Europe-wide in the respect of looking at every country, but we sort of took a sample of countries that have a similar media landscape in terms of growth, innovation, and challenges as well. So in terms of, thank you, so in terms of what we mean by sustainability. So I think at the early stages of this research, we decided, and this was between Nesta UCLan, which is the University of Central Lancashire, and then JLab in Utrecht in the Netherlands. We had decided that sustainability itself, because it's a word that's used a lot, we decided that it's quite vague and it's quite a subjective term as well. What do you mean by sustainable? So what we did is broke down, so we, as part of the 35 case studies, we surveyed hyperlocal publishers, and we broke down into 3 areas. So one was viable, so that was, are they a hyperlocal publisher who is producing content that is filling a gap within a local community or a gap within the media landscape? Sustainable, which meant that they're generating enough income in order to sustain content production. And then resilient was a level where we saw hyperlocal publishers who were generating enough income in order to sustain a living, so they weren't having to necessarily go out and have another job at the same time. We also found that even though there were similarities across the countries that we looked at, there's also quite a number of differences in terms of the way that media is funded or supported, whether it's through government, whether it's through corporate organisations. And so the research was designed not just to be a very practical, it's quite a chunky bit of work, but it's quite a practical, hands-on publication for practitioners themselves. So it wasn't designed for an academic purpose. So I definitely encourage everyone in the room who is a community publisher as such to read through it and look at some of the conclusions and recommendations. But as part of that as well, we also had recommendations for academics in terms of where the gaps were for further research in this space, and also for policymakers as well, because obviously there's certain things that practitioners can be doing in order to become more sustainable or more resilient in terms of their income, but there's also barriers in terms of a policy level and even at other local level and in the media landscape in terms of the role that traditional media players have as well. So just to go quickly through some of the key revenue streams that we saw that people were exploiting and sort of most successful with. So certainly the key thing is diversifying revenues. So not one person, I think a lot of people, and this isn't just for community journalists, but this is for lots of other sort of small organisations that are based in the community, whether it's arts organisations or what have you, that people just think, I'll do advertising, I'll place advertising on my website and I'll make money that way. But of course, there's such minimal money coming in. There's certain barriers to some advertising as well, in particular Google AdSense, which we found that wasn't working very well for hyperlocal publishers. So diversifying revenue streams is a key thing, so looking at a whole range of different areas where money can be coming in from. Print is actually having a resurgence as well, so funnily enough, even though there's lots of conversations at these kind of journalism events about print is dead and newspapers are dead, I mean, that's very much the case for, I would say, regional and national press, particularly in the UK, in terms of readership levels going down of print, because everyone is going more and more online. But in terms of community journalism and hyperlocal levels, we actually see that print is a really valuable source for them to be tapping into local communities and to build up a really positive relationship with local businesses, because I think that local businesses still very much trust print because they can see the return on investment, and they don't necessarily trust or have the skills or expertise to place their advertising online. So that also then brings into partnerships. So we found that hyperlocal publishers who were building up really good relationships with other businesses or other hyperlocals in their local area, where they were having a really big presence in their local community. So they were turning up to local council meetings, they were getting involved in local campaigns that raised their profile, and they were able to do even sort of business deals with other services, which meant their costs were coming down. So maybe around print or maybe around volunteers or things like that. Volunteering also, not that volunteering brings money in, but of course it's reducing your overheads, and hyperlocal publishers on the whole fundamentally rely on volunteers to help them sustain content production and to do some of the other back-end things. And part of that as well is then the sharing economy. We saw that there's a hand-in-hand relationship with community journalism and the sharing economy and the exchange of services, and again to sort of bring costs down and to make services more cost and time efficient. Crowdfunding, a great thing for particular projects, and I think there's a challenge, I think, with crowdfunding or even sort of grant funding in that respect, that lots of independent organisations, and again this isn't just to do with journalism, but lots of sort of independent organisations or startups look as an easy win to get grant funding, and then they actually become sort of building negative habits of constantly relying on grant funding or constantly relying on crowdfunding to get income coming in. But whereas we see that that sort of thing is really great for a particular campaign or project, but not necessarily for long-term sustainability of a service. And then the last thing I will tap on is native advertising and sponsored content. So this is where advertising, we saw that there was sort of general positive trends to do with native advertising and sponsored content that hyperlocal publishers are using. And even though they might see as certain barriers, so I think a lot of hyperlocal publishers, because they're invested in a community, and I would say the vast majority of them come from a social good perspective rather than a money-making sort of perspective. A lot of them don't like advertising because they think it's going to go against what they stand for, it's going to clash with their branding and their messages and things like that. But we're seeing sort of a more of an increase about how sponsored content can be used to be placed within a brand without, you know, destroying their message as such. I'm just seeing if there's any other key point. I guess the last thing that I think is the greatest potential for future, and especially as we're looking more at, and I know, as Diane said, you know, a very current theme in media in general is around sort of transparency and plurality and people's lack of trust more and more in mainstream media, is that also then gives opportunities for startups and independent journalists where they can tap into sort of things that probably traditionally mainstream media could, so video and data, for instance. So I will leave it there for now. Questions will be at the end, and I will hand over to
me first.
You first.
Catherine, thank you very much, Catherine. Catherine's details are here. Do kind of keep an eye on them. And the Nesta research is there and free and downloadable. I mean, we're at a time when we can share this stuff, so please do share it. It's really useful information. Thank you, Catherine. As I say, questions at the end. We will make sure there's time for that. But can I now introduce Ivana D'Alessandro? Ivana is in charge of projects within the Council of Europe. And the Council of Europe's done an awful lot of different projects over the years in terms of media diversity. And this specific one, which is called the Diversity Accelerator, or DIVA. So, Ivana.
Thank you, Diane. As you can see from my surname, I'm Italian, but I will speak in English, first as a regard to my co-panelists, and second because I would like to break some of the stereotypes that pretend that Italians can only speak Italian. So I hope I will not make too many mistakes and you will be kind with me. Yes, I'm very happy that we have this possibility to be here at this festival. It has been 2 days of really interesting debates, and I also think we should do this more often, because it's true that the Council of Europe works a lot on media, and actually the international standards that have been created at the Council of Europe, first of all the European Convention on Human Rights, protects media freedom and media freedom of expression and of information since over 60 years now. And it's true that we do a lot of job in cooperation with the media. I also think there are a lot of human rights standards that we implement that apply to journalists and that help them to deal also with disinformation and propaganda, two topics which have been dealt with quite extensively in these 2 days. Next slide, please. I said the European Convention on Human Rights has protected journalists for over 60 years, and the European Court of Human Rights, which also belongs to the Council of Europe, has defended through the judgments and jurisprudence the freedom of expression of the journalists. So why we have placed in the House of Human Rights, Democracy and the Rule of Law so much importance on the media? Because we believe that you have a role to play in the democratic process itself, first by ensuring multiple perspectives in the political information and debate, but also the overall independence, pluralism and diversity of the media is a guarantee of building more democratic society, and linking it with the diversity, we believe also that it's useful to build up more inclusive societies. We strongly support the role of the media in the creation and dissemination of information and ideas and of critical thinking within the citizens. But we are also aware that more recently we are witnessing huge changes in the media landscape. We have seen there's a lot of difficulties perhaps to adapt to these new models that are linked to the digital world. At the same time, we believe that every challenge may be used as an opportunity. And that's why I think it's interesting to note that DIVA is not implemented and is not launched by the division of the Council of Europe that deals with media, that works with public service broadcasters and mainstream media and legacy media, but by a division which works on intercultural integration and which works with local authorities and media as partners of building more inclusive societies. And that's the role we would like to help media to have, to shape perceptions, to contribute to make societies from being fearful to being tolerant, but we also say tolerance is not enough. We would like the societies to be welcoming. And yesterday I've assisted to a panel about migration and different ways of reporting on migration, and I liked very much the idea that migration can be seen as an opportunity to report in a more creative and innovative way that applies to diversity in general. Diversity in our society is a fact. We live in a globalized world. We have cultural diversity everywhere in Europe. We have different opinions and we have different beliefs. And if media take a lead in reporting about the diversity advantage or the advantage that diversity brings to our society, then we will make a big step forward. And still, we believe, we have seen that, yes, it's fine. Yeah. We have seen that sometimes the laws of the market impose either to take diversity out from the reporting or to use the cultural diversity in a negative way. And there is a lot of spreading of rumors, stereotypes, sometimes even ways of reporting that can lead to hate and hate crimes. And there were Diva camps to take the changes in the media landscape as an opportunity and to test with the journalists already committed to diversity new business models that would allow them to gain a sustainable model for being free and independent in the choice of the reporting. Next, please. So the project started as a test. It has been running for 1.5 years. It's going to finish soon, and then we will evaluate the results. The aim was starting with 10 ideas from journalists, from young journalists, and to try and set with them 10 new potential startups using and testing the methodology that we have devised together with Diane, Sebastian, and the other mentors. And the aim would be to use this methodology further on as a replicable model, and I hope there will be uptake from the media world and promote diversity through these new startups to finally achieve on the long term what we call societal change. I think there is a lot of scope for this. I'm really happy we have been to Perugia at this festival this year where migration, diversity, populism and fake news have had so much importance on the agenda. So I really hope that our intervention here will be the start of a new partnership with you all. Thank you.
So thank you for that, Ivana. And again, questions at the end. So if you have questions to the Council of Europe, please do hold on to them because there'll be time at the end. So as you can see, 10 projects. And what are they? Well, we've got a little video. We asked some of our wonderful mentees who were with us in Berlin a month ago at a training session to talk about, in a few seconds, what their project is. So QVT. It's gone very quiet, hasn't it? Any moment now, if you'd like to play the Vox, that would be fantastic. Hurrah.
Straight is a different perspective of female homosexuality. We are the next level. We connect female homosexuality with lifestyle in an easy-going way, and we are the next level, and we make the community great.
Invisible Cities wants to represent diversity, giving the voice to underrepresented people from the African diaspora who live in different cities in the world. So we're ready to listen about them.
My project wants to make the media more representative of multicultural Britain. South will be an online magazine that creates journalism opportunities for young people from South London who are of black and minority ethnicities.
Hello, I'm Gana Mirzoyan.
Hi, I'm Navartova Nisyan and we represent Urbanista team.
Urbanista introduces you to the diverse culture of Armenia and tells about challenges in urban development in the country with difficult parts.
and it engaged local authorities and communities into the decision making and into the protection of urban environment.
My name is Steve, and the name of my project is the Regional Editors Network, and it aims to support disadvantaged journalists and to empower them to start their own media, whether they be from ex-offending backgrounds or homeless backgrounds.
Dance Grist is a free, international, downloadable magazine produced by dancers for dancers. It is impossible to speak about dance without speaking about the cultures and the country from which the dance arose, so it's automatically inclusive. I'm increasing that by ensuring that different reading levels are going to be able to use the same magazine.
We are Media for Change. We are a digital media agency which offers exclusive investigative journalism from Central and Eastern Europe. We examine problems that are outside media agenda, and we strive to create business which makes social change and is also life-changing experience for those who work for that.
My name is Frank. I'm from Germany, and I'm the host of a podcast called Halbe Kartoffel, meaning half potato. And in it I talk to people who are German, but have a migrational background just like me. But don't worry, it's not a therapy session. It's just a loose and witty, funny conversation about our experiences, and regularly, just basically about life.
Fantastic. So, thank you. Yeah, I think there's a little round of applause. So those were, in fact, 8. You might have counted them and thought, hang on, they said 10. 2 of our colleagues weren't with us in Berlin, and so you didn't get a chance to hear a little bit about the fantastic Solomon, which is representing people who are in Greece but not of Greek original origin, talking about and sharing experiences in their lives without making them into dramas. And also Syria Wire, which Natasha and Mohammed are putting together, and that's about Syrian journalists who are now refugees reporting on the story of their country. So we've got a wide variety of fabulous projects there, all tackling very different things. Diversity, of course, isn't just what you can see. It is also below the surface. So quite a lot of different diversities represented within those projects. And the way it's been worked is that we have 4 mentors who've been through this themselves. They have taken that risk and set up their own business. They've dealt with all those struggles of how do you make it sustainable. You do need to eat, and you actually rather need somewhere to sleep while you're working. So one of our mentors is with us now, Sebastian Esser, who set up Kraut Reporter, who's going to talk a bit about not only his startup, but also something about what it is to mentor and the issues. Sebastian.
Thanks a lot, Diane, and thanks for inviting me. And I'm one, as you said, I'm one of the mentors. The others are also in the room. That's Tassos from Athens Live and Gerger from Direct 36 in Hungary. Also Francesco, which I don't see, from Termini TV. And we worked with these people that you've seen in the video before to try to turn their media businesses based on diversity into sustainable business. And preparing for this, I did the same as you were describing before, Catherine. Think about what does sustainable mean to me, because it means so many things to so many people. First of all, that's my name, that's my email address. So if any of that, what I'm going to tell you, interests you, please do write me. Well, sustainability, what it doesn't mean is, to me, you find some money, you spend it on doing journalism until it's gone, and then you start over. Repeat. Find some money, spend it on journalism, start over. I mean, that's what you were talking about before, right? So you might apply for some of money to a foundation. Great, you spend it on travel, translations, publishing, data analysis, programmers, publish your story, and then usually you go back to zero, you start over. That's not a business, that's not sustainable. And it's also not good for yourself because it's very stressful. What's worse, in my opinion, is that the stories that you do are the stories that you find the money for. So you're actually working for the institutions that provide the money. You're not doing the work that you want to do or that your readers are interested in, but the institutions, who are usually, well-meaning, but they do have their own agendas, of course. They have to have some agenda. So that's what the kind of journalism is that is being produced by these by this system. So it's great to see these people that we've worked with over the last 6 months who are trying to find a different way to try to make money with this kind of journalism that is basically it's for a niche audience. But we believe that some of them, and maybe even most of them, will be able to turn this into a sustainable business. So here comes my definition of sustainability. Came up with it only yesterday. So first thing, it's a repeatable process. It's something that you can do on a regular basis to earn a predictable income. You know what you're going to be earning the next months or maybe even the next year roundabout. You're not suddenly at the starting point again. To do professional journalism, this is not a hobby. Then it's not journalism, but you have to invest everything that you have for a specific community of users. It's not something that you just put out there and you don't know and you don't care who's it for. And those users trust this kind of journalism. To me, that's what we're looking for with Krautreporter, with my project. Because sustainability is something that most media companies have not been able to achieve in the last, say, 10, 15 years. They rely heavily on advertising or have been relying, and that's not sustainable because most ad-driven journalism outlets are making losses. They're basically living off the legacy income sources, and looking at this definition, that's not sustainable. And also, it's bad for the quality of journalism. It's made for clicks. It's made for the advertisers, it's not made for users, and it has grave implications because if journalism loses its integrity, it becomes content. If you're talking about native advertising or the other words you have to come up with when you're saying, well, we'll get brands into our content, then you're basically doing the job of people who are saying journalism are all liars. And that's something that we've heard a lot this year at this conference. It's a big theme in Germany, in the US, all over Europe. So users don't trust journalism anymore, especially digital journalism, where they kind of have come into a habit of not trusting it, and that's a big problem. So to sum up, these are the two problems that we're trying to tackle. One is the business model, and the connected problem is trust, and that's the most important issue, I guess. So problem number one that we've tried to tackle with Krautreporter, we did a big crowdfunding in 2014. We found 17,000 supporters for a new digital magazine out of Germany, out of Berlin, to kind of do a pre-sale of a subscription of 1 year journalism. And 17,000 people supported that. They pay €5 a month and fund our journalism and our website. And they are our only source of income. So we don't have any advertising. We're completely 100% member funded. So that's our business model: subscriptions, predictable income, only one source. That's our kind of concept of sustainability. Problem number two, trust. Krautreporter is kind of a play of words with the German word Kraut, as for Germans, and crowd as in crowdsourcing, crowdfunding, the crowd. So we see our reporters as journalism agents for our members. And that means we try to have a very close relationship with them. We ask them not only for money, but for information, for contacts, for expertise. We ask them questions like, where do you live? What do you know? What are you specialists in? What's your occupation, and so on. So we have a database of specialists that are also of our funding members. So what we do is a complete focus on our members, on their needs, what they are interested in, That's our current website, I think, from yesterday. It works well. We're growing monthly. We have a staff of 10 reporters, lots of freelancers. We turned the whole company into a cooperative. So basically, we're also owned by our readers, by our members. You can buy shares of our cooperative. I mean, you could do it today. Please do. Hundreds of people did it. And also we are running a international crowdfunding platform. So if you want to crowdfund in a different European country based on euros in your own language, please come to us. It's called Write That Down. And if you're interested in running it in your country, please talk to me afterwards. All right, so in my mind, we're close to achieving this. I'm pretty sure it's going to be stable, it's sustainable, and my aim is to just keep doing that for the rest of my life, and that's basically where I am right now. The model is called subscription crowdfunding. You use the methods of crowdfunding to sell subscriptions, in turn crowdfunding into something sustainable, and that's something that lots of news media outlets all over Europe, all over the world are trying to do. So I'd like to insert a little advertising part also for my second company, which is called Steady. And it's a subscription crowdfunding platform that you can set up your own membership model in. And, I'll stop talking about this, but have a look and talk to me if you're interested. Of course, subscription memberships is great, but they're not the only solutions. And we tried to find different solutions for each of the mentees in this DIVA program. And Diane, you asked me what some of the learnings were, and I tried to come up with them. And I'm not sure I have any great learnings yet, but one would be, what we've realized is that you really have to focus. Focus on one idea. Don't make it complicated. If you have one idea, that's the one thing you should do and nothing else. And the other thing is start publishing right away. Don't think about it for months. Start publishing today, even if nobody will read it, will listen to it, will look at it. At least you've started and you've started working on it, and then you can grow, iterate, and turn it into something sustainable in the long run. But thinking about it too long is not a good way to start a business, also in media, or especially in media. So there are some great projects in this DIVA program. Lots of great journalists around here. I would really recommend to talk to them. Talk to me if you want me to recommend some of them to you. And thanks for inviting us, having us at this program, Ivana and the Council of Europe. And I'm pretty sure some of these guys will be very successful and will come back to Perugia and tell their success stories. Thanks.
Thank you, Sebastian. Right. So I think one of the difficulties is that we are kind of looking at is that journalists are required to not only be journalists, be able to find stories, substantiate the stories, be good with the technology. We were all turning into little tech geeks as well, and quite right as well. But you're also talking about them being business people. I think that's, so if I can just ask you, Sebastian, I mean, how hard is it to find that mixture of skills, because they are different skill sets?
Yes, they are, but also you can find specialists for these skill sets. You don't have to know a lot about accounting and stuff. You have to, kind of look at your costs and your income sources and then make that work. But that's basically what I mean by business people. You don't have to have a BA in business administration, and especially when starting off and slowly growing your business, it's not as important as you might think to be a business person. It's more important to just keep doing it, keep pushing it, and then you'll learn. Certainly I'm not a great business person, and it kind of works.
Okay. Catherine, I mean, in terms of the research you did you find that as an issue, that combination of skill sets that people need in order to have sustainable models that are also doing the good stuff, doing some diverse and inclusive reporting?
There we go. Yeah, definitely. And I think even not just in this piece of research, but lots of other research across the board, looking at who publishes, like who are hyperlocal publishers. And speaking of diversity, there is sort of, I guess, the same problem in community journalism as much in terms of it's generally white, middle-aged, middle-class men. But that aside, their backgrounds, it's not like they've all gone through journalism school and they've all been mainstream journalists and now they're sort of creating their own services or websites. You know, they come from a range of different backgrounds. And I think some of the challenges are about, and this is based on a separate project that we did, is looking at that a lot of people will just throw content. So I completely agree with not hesitating in starting to write content, because otherwise you're going to hesitate that your website's not perfect and you're investing too much time in that. But in terms of, on the flip side, if you're creating content and you're spending so much time and effort just creating content for the sake of it, hoping that someone will read it, that's also not an effective use of time. So there is a balance between knowing, I guess, some tricks and sort of, not necessarily business skills, but I guess certain other skills around whether it's analysing your audiences through data analytics and things like that to understand what their interests are, what they're reading, what they're not reading, and how you capitalise on that.
I mean, just interestingly, a colleague of mine who's a business professor at my university, she recommends it's pop-ups rather than startups. You know, the idea of have a go, try it out, test it, because then you'll find out a bit about the audience. But we're actually amassing through the DIVA project quite a lot of information. So Ivana, if I come to you, I mean, how is that going to get out there? Because as you said in your comments, we've only got 10 people doing projects. That's not going to change the world, even though they're fantastically interesting pieces. It's about what happens afterwards, isn't it?
Yes, definitely. It's about what happens afterward, but I also think it's important to test. I think that's the strength at the Council of Europe. We have a media division doing in-depth work with journalists about setting human rights standards, about identifying practices, about having dialogue, about listening to worries. And they are doing the wonderful job on the long term. And at the same time, we are cooperating with them for testing, for launching things that at the beginning, honestly, we don't know if they are going to work or not. But if you don't test, you will not, you will never get a result. In my division, which is, I think it's important to stress, it's in the Democratic Innovation Directorate. So we are those who risks. And in the intercultural cities, so with local authorities department, what we are going to do with DIVA is a bit leaning on the achievements of past experiences we did with previous projects. One was Mars, dealing with media against racism in sport, and Median, which was building a sort of a European network of journalists committed to diversity, is to handle this material, the methodology and the model elaborated to the media community that cooperate with us. And this time we'll probably also handle it to the media division who works with the legacy media, because we think that a dialogue between new startuppers and the digital news world and the legacy media, it's needed, and perhaps more than ever. And we believe that there are a lot of links and bridges to be built there. So that will be the focus of our action later on.
So all of the work that comes from DIVA, which will end up in, if you like, little modules, there'll be things that will be free, resources that would be, if you like, how do you take your idea from an idea to a startup, with lots of experience and examples which we'll be able to pass on, and that'll all be on the Council of Europe website, but also, I mean, we will disseminate it as far as possible. I do want to leave some time for questions, so thank you for the moment, panel, but are there any questions from the floor? Yeah, is there a microphone that we could, thank you, it's rushing down here even as we speak. Thank you. To be on.
Hello. My question is for Sebastian, because you said that your readers owned the media because they're paying for it and it's your main source of income. And I am thinking that somehow could that shape your information as well, because you're dealing with certain topics in accordance to the ideology or the experiences, the background of your readers, and somehow that's shaping as well the information and the way you're making the information. Thank you.
Is that sort of pertaining to how you avoid the idea of the bubbles we were talking about in other sessions? Yeah, okay.
The battles? What?
So an interest bubble, you know, so people just, you only want to find out the stuff you want to find out about, which excludes many of us.
I understood battles.
Same thing.
You're right, but then it's true for any media, right? If you want to sell a newspaper to someone right-wing and you're a left-wing newspaper, that's going to be hard. So we're just in a niche, and we really focus on helping our reporters to keep their independence, and it's not very hard because they're stubborn. Also, our members value independence. They value discourse. They value the exchange of different ideas. So I see your point, but it hasn't been a problem in reality for us up to now.
Thank you. Any other questions? I mean, I think there is something in this. One of the sessions yesterday I went to, one of the speakers was saying it would be great if they put on their own website the kind of video and the kind of opinions that their readers disagreed with. I think that's a fantastic idea, but your problem is if you do too much of that, what will happen to your readers and viewers? So I think there is an issue about how you manage to keep some of that difference, some of the, if you like, breaking the boundaries with maintaining an audience.
That's true, but then again, we're not the only medium that they consume. You know, we're just one piece in the stream, hopefully an important one. But you know, how you mix your filter bubble is, in the end, is up to you.
Okay. Are there any other questions? If not, I'm going to do the organisers a favour because they always want to get us out and the next lot in. So on your behalf, can I? Oh, is there a question? I'm so sorry. Yeah.
I was just wondering, I'm a lecturer in journalism at a Dutch university. I teach media and diversity, and most of the time when I talk about diversity with my students, there's sort of the nuance that diversity in journalism is something that you do in the niche markets, right? So in the startups, aside from all the legacy, how do you see this relationship evolving? I mean, is there hope that mainstream media, newsrooms and content will diversify, or is it something that we should do in communities like what we see in the DIVA project?
I think there are quite many legacy media that tackle the issues related to diversity in a professional way. It means being objective towards diversity. Of course, I would like to hear only good things about diversity, but that's not true. Life is complex, and there are quite a lot of media that do a tremendous good job supported by investigative journalism. The thing is, what is the visibility of this work? And here comes DIVA, or here come the work that my colleagues in the media division are doing on the internet strategy and the digital world, is to bring these legacy media to be again the masters of information and communication, a thing that now probably is not the case for everybody. So that's why I was saying that it's important to build more links between the legacy media and the new startups, because I guess that there is a chance for both to learn from each other. And I think the legacy media are having quite a lot of troubles to adapt to the new world, but there are a lot of people who are journalists because they choose this job and profession for contributing to the society, and they do it quite well. So I'm always confident, I'm always positive. It's about trying and trying again, and probably with initiatives like DIVA, we will be able to contaminate more people around Europe.
I mean, I'd agree. It's a real issue, and you have to do it at all levels. You know, a mainstream, legacy, startups. There's no one answer, and these are complex issues. I mean, my feeling is certainly in the UK that there is an appetite amongst mainstream media to be more diverse, and by that they don't mean just have one reporter who covers diverse communities, which is not inclusion. I mean, it's useful, but it's not the whole story. So for in the UK, there are moves to do that, but it remains a real difficulty. I started off by saying, you know, certainly the media in my country, journalists are 95% white. Now, there clearly is an issue in a country where that's not the demographic. So I think it's anything that we can do in all our different spheres of influence to try and change that, put pressure on. But there's no two ways about it. The industry does understand that disconnect and lack of trust, and diversity is at the heart of that. If you don't see people like you, speaking like you do, about things that affect you, you don't trust it. So I think there is a growing sense of that, but hopefully DIVA is a part of the sort of movement, but it'll take an awful lot, I think. I did say I'd end on time, so can I thank you very much for turning up? Can I thank the panel here, Sebastian Esser, Ivana D'Alessandro and Catherine Giles. Thank you very much. Have a lovely day.
Was viable, so that was are they a hyperlocal publisher who is producing content that is filling a gap within a local community or a gap within the media landscape? Sustainable, which meant that they're generating enough income in order to sustain content production. And then resilient was a level where we saw hyperlocal publishers who were generating enough income in order to sustain a living, so they weren't having to necessarily go out and have another job at the same time. We also found that you know, even though there were similarities across the countries that we looked at, there's also quite a number of differences in terms of the way that media is funded or supported, whether it's through government, whether it's through corporate organisations. And so the research was designed not just to be a very practical, it's quite a chunky bit of work, but it's quite a practical, hands-on publication for practitioners themselves. So it wasn't designed for an academic purpose. So I definitely encourage everyone in the room who is a community publisher as such to read through it and look at some of the conclusions and recommendations. But as part of that as well, we also had recommendations for academics in terms of where the gaps were for further research in this space, and also for policymakers as well, because obviously there's certain things that practitioners can be doing in order to become more sustainable or more resilient in terms of their income, but there's also barriers in terms of a policy level and even at other local level and in the media landscape in terms of the role that traditional media players have as well.
Which is a German startup that has been successfully working for a couple of years, but also he's a mentor for some of our DIVA participants. So if I can just say a few words before we start. I mean, it's been a fantastic festival so far, I think. I mean, do you agree? Has it been a good festival so far? Yeah, I'll take that as a yes. Some of the sessions I've been to so far around populism, how the media has, we've not quite managed to capture and report properly on populism, issues to do with diversity in journalism in the Arab world, and it seemed to me that almost all of those sessions, the background to it seems to be the issue of a lack of diversity within our journalists. You know, if we are not within communities representing those people, part of those stories, we miss them. So we miss the populist story because certainly if we think of the UK in terms of journalism, 95% of journalists in the UK are white, mostly male, and over 50% have come through private education. So you're talking about only a particular proportion of people who are making it into journalists. And we know that if you come from spaces, you know the stories. People will come and talk to you about them. So this idea of diversity inclusion, really, really important, I think. And it's been echoed through a number of the sessions I've been to. And that's where we are in the sustainable and inclusive session here. So without further ado, can I invite Catherine Giles to talk about her research? They say it's into sustainable funding for hyperlocals in the UK and Europe. Catherine.
Thank you. It'd be good if I pressed that on, was finding the most sustainable and sort of beneficial incomes. So lots of organisations had done lots of research about who was producing content, who was consuming it, and also looking at sort of the landscape in terms of where hyperlocal media fit within mainstream media. And even in terms of the types of businesses that hyperlocal publishers are. So many of them are sole traders, for instance. Some of them are limited companies. Some of them are set up as cooperatives. But this particular piece of research was looking at the different revenue streams that hyperlocal publishers have. So we did 35 case studies from across the UK, Netherlands, France, Belgium and Sweden. So it's not, it wasn't sort of Europe-wide in the respect of looking at every country, but we sort of took a sample of countries that have a similar media landscape in terms of growth, innovation and challenges as well. So in terms of, thank you. So in terms of what we mean by sustainability. So I think at the early stages of this research, we decided, and this was between Nesta UCLan, which is the University of Central Lancashire, and then JLab in Utrecht in the Netherlands. We had decided that sustainability itself, because it's a word that's used a lot, we decided that it's quite vague and it's quite a subjective term as well. What do you mean by sustainable? So what we did is broke down, so we, as part of the 35 case studies, we surveyed hyperlocal publishers and we broke down into 3 areas. So one...
Fine weather for this session, so I hope you appreciate that, and not to spend too much time looking out the window though. Welcome to this session which is on sustainable and inclusive media. Particular media startups, we're looking at the way in which we might get some greater diversity into our media output by having a more diverse base of people and diverse projects out there, different stories being covered and from different perspectives. So my name is Diane Kemp. My day job is being Professor of Journalism at Birmingham City University in the UK, but I'm really proud to be coordinating a Council of Europe project called DIVA. So we are divas here, Diversity Accelerator. There's a few divas in here, I can tell. Can I get the people who are actually working on the DIVA program, just to put your hands up so you can identify yourselves. Mm-hmm. There we are. So at any point, if you feel like talking to them, you're very welcome. So, I'd like to introduce my panel at this point. To my right is Catherine Giles. Now, Catherine has conducted some really interesting research about the funding, sustainable funding for digital startups, hyperlocals in the UK and Europe, and she's going to be speaking about what kind of funding, where you can look, what's the best and most sustainable forms. Next to her is Ivana D'Alessandro, who is project leader for the Council of Europe, and she'll be talking about what the Council of Europe does in terms of diverse media, but also particularly about our DIVA project. And Sebastian Esser, who is a journalist and founder and co-editor of the Kraut Report.
So I, in my current role, I don't particularly do anything in journalism innovation in my day job, which is at an organisation called Digital Catapult, which I won't go into. But I do freelance work as part of work with Google News Lab, and that is around training and running workshops with journalists in various different countries. And that's sort of a spin-off of some of the work that I did previously in an organisation called Nesta, which is the UK's Innovation Foundation. And they are a philanthropic organisation. They do lots of policy and research work as well. And the reason why they were involved with supporting hyperlocal media, or community journalism as other people might know it as, is because we saw it as an organisation as being a fundamental part of community cohesion, building communities, getting citizens to be more proactive. And it was a 3-year program, and we did lots of grant funding of projects, so looking particularly at journalism and community media projects that were using technology. So we were focused on digital first, but not digital exclusive. And we did lots of primary research as well. So we partnered with lots of different organisations in the UK and also in Europe. And one particular piece of research was this hyperlocal revenues in the UK and Europe, the road to sustainability. So we ventured in this piece of work because there was nothing in Europe about how hyperlocal publishers were getting in their income and who